Welcome back to Financial Clarity for Doctors, everyone. This is Rachelle here with Corey Janoff.
Hello.
We are approaching the end of another academic year and at the beginning of a new one, obviously. Many of you may be coming up on a big job transition if you're switching from medical school to residency to fellowship to a new attending job, if you're in an academic position and you're just starting a new job. So a lot of times there's a lot of big pressing questions when we're coming up on big job changes. And then one of the ones that might just be in the back of your brain, but not super pressing, is what to do with your old retirement plan. And some of you may be thinking, what should I do with that string of retirement plans that I've left behind me that I don't really know where they are? So today we're going to spend some time walking through all the different options that you have for those retirement plans, because really it's not like you have to do just one thing. You do have some options.
Yeah, numerous options. So in no particular order, the first thing you potentially could do with your old retirement plan is take a distribution, just cash it out. That being said, if you're listening to this podcast, you're a responsible human being, and you probably know that withdrawing money while you're not retired or at least under the age of 60 and technically ineligible to withdraw money from a retirement account should be at the very bottom of the list. One, you'll stunt your retirement growth because you'll now have less money in retirement to compound over time. You'll have to pay income taxes on the withdrawal plus a penalty. So you have to pay extra taxes on that money to get to it before age 59 and a half, according to current IRS rules. So really, last resort, you should never take retirement distributions until you're officially retired and over the age of 60 from a qualified retirement plan. But that's technically one of the options. If you leave an employer, you could cash it out, but not advisable.
Absolutely. Once in a while, if you have like a super, super tiny balance, an employer might even just send you a check. It might just be like, oh, this is $500. And I mean, if that happens, it's not a huge deal, but you can still get it into another retirement plan. So that's one of the second options is just if you have a plan with your new employer, it can be fairly simple to consolidate your old plans into your new plan. And there's definitely some legwork that you have to do to get it done. But there's also some pros to this. It can be really convenient just to have everything in one spot so you can keep track of it a little bit easier. There's not generally any tax consequences for doing that. You're moving it from an account that has like very similar tax treatment to one that's the same. And so, you haven't taken it out, you haven't taken a distribution, so you don't have to pay any taxes on it if you keep it in a retirement plan. It's not always recommended, but sometimes there's also a way that you can take loans against a balance in an employer plan, whereas there's not with a lot of like IRAs and things like that. So that can technically be a pro too. It's just that, there's some amount of that money can be accessible if you really, really, really need it. There are some cons with work plans though. You're very limited generally on what your investment options are. So if you're investing yourself in like an individual retirement account, something you've set up on your own, you have lots of investment choices. But in like a 401k or a 403b, they give you a list and it's maybe like 30, 40 mutual funds. A lot of that list is actually like the target date retirement funds. And maybe you have like 15 or 20 other options outside of that. So it's not very comprehensive. You're a little bit limited, which is not the end of the world, but definitely limiting. And then in a lot of cases, you can't get direct assistance with investments in a work plan. So, maybe you're not very comfortable managing your investments on your own and you'd like some help with that. Some employer plans do have options to allow like an advisor to help you with your investments, but a lot of them don't. So that can be a con too. And I think one other thing just to be aware of, it's not necessarily a pro or a con, but there are generally fees in employer plans, which sometimes your employer covers for you. Sometimes you're responsible for part of them. So if you are thinking about consolidating plans, definitely be aware of that. Like look at what the fees are in the new plan, look at what the fees are in the old plan. if the fees in the new plan are higher, it probably doesn't make sense to move your old retirement plan money into that account. Anything to add there, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, at least it gives you more stuff to ponder. You may say, yeah, the fees are a little bit higher, but I don't want to deal with having numerous plans. It's easier to manage if it's consolidated. So we just have to, how much higher are they, and make that decision. If you're going between hospitals, most hospitals pretty large retirement plans, so the fees are going to be pretty modest. But if you're joining a smaller practice, with only a few employees, it's going to be more costly on a per person basis to run that retirement plan and administer it. So the fees and expenses could be a little bit higher as a result. So again, case by case basis there. Another option, you could roll your old retirement money into a IRA, an individual retirement account. Especially if you have multiple old retirement plans, could be attractive to consolidate them all into one rollover IRA, where you have a little bit more control over the investments, or a lot more control. You pick where you want to roll it to. You now, instead of having a couple dozen investment choices, have thousands of investment choices. You can also, if desired, have a professional help you directly with that IRA, often a little bit easier than within the 401k. Now, any Roth money can be rolled into a Roth IRA. Any pre-tax money would go into a traditional IRA. So, advantage, a little bit more control, consolidate into one account. The downside, if you roll pre-tax money into a traditional IRA, that's going to prohibit you from doing the backdoor Roth moving forward. You can't have any pre-tax IRA money lying around and still do the backdoor Roth IRA. Now, that potentially soon may not be an issue. I know Congress is trying, so far unsuccessfully, but trying to get rid of Roth conversions and the backdoor Roth IRA, so it might be a moot point here within the next year. But as of now, if you're still actively working and doing Roth conversions, we got to weigh that into the consideration as well. If you roll your pre-tax IRA money into a traditional IRA and you have other money in that traditional IRA that didn't come from a qualified employer retirement plan, then you lose some of the asset protection that comes with qualified employer retirement plans. But if it's all money from old employer plans, it's still going to be a highly protected asset, I believe, in every single state, but I guess confirm with a asset protection attorney in your state. And then you can't do loans from IRAs like you can with some 401k and 403b plans. Again, if we're having to take loans out of our retirement accounts, we're probably not doing the best job financially, or like stuff happens. Sometimes we need quick access to money that we didn't plan for. One thing you can do though with IRAs, there's what's called the 60-day rollover rule, where you can actually withdraw money from an IRA, and as long as you put that amount back in within 60 days, you're not penalized and you don't pay any taxes on it. So for a very short-term access to capital, that could be attractive, but you got to be careful with that, because if it goes a day beyond 60, you're going to be subject to income taxes plus a 10% penalty if you're under age 59 and a half. So anything else on that one, Rachelle?
No, I don't think so. I think one thing to just back up to really quickly is that within your work retirement plans, you can have both pre-tax contributions and you can potentially have some Roth contributions. So the pre-tax contributions are any dollars that you put in, and that's kind of like the default normally. So that means you get a tax deduction. You haven't paid any taxes on that money. When you move it into a rollover IRA or a traditional IRA, it's the same thing. It's pre-tax money, so you don't pay taxes on it. With Roth money, if you made contributions on a Roth basis into like a Roth 403b or a Roth 401k, that money can be moved into like a Roth IRA, which is also fairly simple. There's no tax consequences for that, because you're moving it from an account with like the same tax treatment to the same tax treatment. So Roth money, you don't get a tax deduction for, but then you get to invest that money. It could grow, and then you can take it out when you're retired and you don't pay any taxes on that growth, which is really attractive, especially if you're young, because your money has like a really long time to grow. So one other slightly more complicated thing you can do is you can take that pre-tax money that you put into a 401k or a 403b, or that your employer put into that account, and you can convert it into a Roth IRA. And when you convert money, it's taking the pre-tax money and moving it into that Roth account where you never have to pay taxes again. And because you did that, you have to pay taxes in the year that you convert it. And you don't want to like withhold the taxes from the conversion or anything like that, because that counts as taking money out early, and then you pay that penalty tax too. Basically what happens is you do the conversion, you tell them you don't want to withhold taxes, and then you end up owing at the end of the year when you file your taxes, it gets added to your taxable income. So when you file, in February, March, April, you end up probably owing some money on your taxes. It just kind of nets against whatever other tax things were going on that current year. So there are some like pros to that. I think it's counterintuitive a little bit, because you're like, why would I intentionally choose to pay taxes? But a lot of times, especially when we're dealing with trainees, we have folks that are in lower tax brackets compared to what we expect them to be in. And the other thing is that we know what tax rates look like now. We have no idea what tax rates will look like when you're retired. So you can pay like a known tax amount now on a smaller balance, or you can wait until you're retired and pay who the heck knows what kind of tax rate when you're retired, and then on a larger dollar amount, because, ideally it's grown in between. So I think it can be a really attractive move, but it can also be pretty burdensome if the balance you're converting is large. So a lot of times when we're thinking about doing this, it's like, okay, so how much are we converting? If it's $10,000, then, the taxes on $10,000 might not be huge. If it's $50,000, like that's a much more substantial tax burden that we absolutely need to be considering more carefully. There's some cons too. Like if you don't have the money to pay the taxes, don't do it. Like that would not be a good place to be in. Absolutely. If you do decide to do it, your CPA might be mad at you, but we don't care about him. Like a lot of times accountants are really focused on like, what are we doing with our taxes right now? But we also want you guys to be thinking about like, what does tax look like for you in the future? Can we take away some of those question marks? Yeah. Go ahead, Corey. You have more to add on taxes, I think.
Yeah, I think one other thing is you kind of look at it in your current circumstances. If you're in residency or fellowship and you change jobs, or switch, go to a different place for fellowship, and you have a small balance in that retirement plan, it could make sense to do that Roth conversion and kind of look at it from the perspective of where do you think taxes will be in the future relative to your current circumstances. And taxes can do one of three things. They can either go up, they can stay the same, or they could go down. And if you're in a lower or higher income tax bracket, the answer to that question might be different for you. Like again, if you're in residency or fellowship, there's a good chance that taxes in the future for you are going to be higher than they are today. So we know two things are certain in life: death and taxes. You're either going to pay your taxes now or pay your taxes later, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to pay those taxes. So if you think taxes today are lower than they will be in the future, that Roth conversion looks pretty attractive, assuming you have the cash on hand to pay that tax bill in April. So you could do the conversion, pay the taxes now, get that money into an account that'll grow tax-free and be accessible tax-free in retirement when taxes, in this example, are likely to be higher. Now, if the opposite is true, if you're at your peak earning years in the top tax bracket and you have a large balance, maybe doing that Roth conversion doesn't make sense because you'd be hit with a large tax bill at the top bracket, and in retirement, there's a good chance taxes will be lower for you than they will be today. So we probably don't want to pay taxes at a higher rate now in order to avoid them at a lower rate later. We'd want to do the opposite: avoid taxes at the higher rate, pay taxes at the lower rate. So kind of depends on your personal circumstances. But especially if you have a smaller balance and you're in a lower income bracket, that Roth conversion is pretty appealing.
Absolutely. I think one option you can also do, which I mean, we can leave it as it is, basically. Like, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to move your retirement accounts. You can leave them in like a million different plans and not have to you have to keep track of them. You got to do all these different things. So it can be challenging to do that, but sometimes it's like the path of least resistance, and that's what happens. But eventually you're probably going to have to take care of it. Eventually you're probably going to have to get them more consolidated than they are. And it can also be really hard to get to the money. So I think you got to make sure, like, do you even have contacts with those old plans? Do you have access to the HR department? Do you have access to like the retirement plan itself? Like, you got to make sure that you're staying on top of those things if you do leave them in different places. But
Yeah, I wouldn't
preferably not.
recommend leaving it as is. Like I
Yep.
have one client who for the last couple years has been trying to get to one of her old retirement plans from like close to 20 years ago, and we're trying to roll it over, and she can't find anyone at that employer to sign off and verify her employment status. And so like her money's essentially stuck. And it's not a large enough balance to where there's motivation to like put a ton of effort into it. They're busy with jobs and working and kids and stuff, but it's like still it's a frustrating pain point. It's like, this is my money, I can't get to it. So yeah, I would encourage you, when you leave an employer, either consolidate into the new employer plan, roll to an IRA, but I wouldn't let it linger too long without taking it with you, because if you just leave your old plans where they are, you're either going to end up with a bunch of old plans, and it's going to be a pain to try and track them down and consolidate them at the end of the day when you're getting to retirement, or you potentially could lose track of them, or potentially have trouble getting to some of them in this case that my client has experienced. So try and roll them over and
Absolutely.
consolidate as you go.
Absolutely. There is one other interesting kind of work retirement plan that we haven't really touched on yet. 401ks and 403bs, all of these options apply. There is a type of account called a 457b that a lot of people sometimes have when they work in hospitals and things like that. And they can be a little bit more complicated because they're not the same kind of qualified plan. If it's like any 457b can generally be moved to another 457b if it's the same type of 457b, but another complicating factor is that there's different types of 457b. Some of them are governmental 457bs and some of them are non-governmental. The governmental ones, like, so if you're working in like a university or something like that, and it's a public university, chances are it's a governmental 457b. Those ones can usually be moved to other qualified plans also. So like a 401k, a 403b, an IRA, something like that. The non-governmental rules, those ones are usually set up by private employers so that you can save more for retirement on a pre-tax basis, but they usually have much stricter distribution rules. And a lot of times, like, you have to touch base with that specific plan to know what all of the options are for getting that money out of there. And they can vary quite a bit. So it's very plan by plan. And I would say, like, if you're using a 457b and you're not at a governmental institution, make sure you really understand what those distributions are. Because at some point, you're going to have to take the money out of that account, and it would be really good to know exactly how that's going to look for you.
Yeah, some plans can be kind of restrictive. Like they'll say, when you stop working here, you have to withdraw your entire balance within 90 days. It's like, well, shoot, that could result in a pretty big tax bill. So maybe we just avoid that plan altogether. Don't contribute to it. Others might, allow you to make a one-time irrevocable election. It's like, I'm either going to take it all out at once. I'm going to, elect equal systematic withdrawals over 10 years. They'll give you a menu to choose from. Some are very flexible, and it's like, do whatever you want with the money. You can leave it as is, take it out over time, dealer's choice. But yeah, one nice thing about 457s is they don't have a penalty for withdrawing it before age 59 and a half. Now, again, we don't want to start tapping into retirement money before we're retired, but that could be, one of the first accounts you draw from. Maybe you're retiring in your late 50s and you can't access your other money until you're in your 60s. Well, let's pull from the 457 first, drain that one without penalty, and then we can get to our other accounts once we're officially eligible. So yeah, the 457 is definitely a little trickier.
A
Now,
little funky. Yep.
one other I don't know if necessarily an option, but scenario, we're kind of talking about people who are still actively employed and moving from one employer to another. But what if you're transitioning to retirement and you don't have a new employer plan to roll to, and you maybe you are old enough to start taking distributions? In that case, it probably does make sense to roll your old retirement accounts into an IRA or a Roth IRA if there's Roth money in there, consolidate that way, because it's a lot easier to take distributions from an IRA than it is from a workplace retirement plan. With workplace plans, there's forms, paperwork, and you gotta, it's a pain. But with IRAs, like you can just link it up to your checking account, set up a systematic withdrawal. Maybe you want monthly income in retirement. Maybe you just want to take, random lump sums once or twice a year to replenish the savings account, and then slowly deplete the savings to support living expenses, but definitely more flexible and easier to manage, control, and take withdrawals from those IRAs than it is from those workplace plans. So it probably does make sense to consolidate everything at that point if you are retiring.
Yep. I think one thing that can be challenging sometimes is the mechanics of actually doing any of this stuff. I feel like that's where people get caught up a lot. But if you're ever unclear, like you've decided you want to do X, Y, Z, I would suggest starting with your existing plan, like the one that you want to move, and you need to get rollover and distribution forms or instructions from them. Sometimes it's as simple as logging on online and like finding the place where it says rollover and filling it out online and signing it. It can be pretty simple. Other times, like it's not very simple, and when in doubt, I would just suggest that you call them. The last statement that you have has some sort of customer service number on it. I would just call them directly. Some like plan managers will even just like fill all that stuff out for you basically over the phone and handle it over the phone for you. So, if it's simple enough, they can do that. And sometimes they might even need to mail you like paper forms or email you paper forms that you have to print and sign and all that kind of stuff. If you are choosing to roll it into like an existing employer plan, you also need to make sure that you call them and discuss that incoming rollover and make sure that it like the check is properly made out, that like it's sent to the right place, all of that kind of stuff, just to make sure that that's processed properly. Because you don't want something to happen in the interim. Like you don't want that to get lost in the shuffle somehow, some way. If you are moving money into like a rollover IRA or a Roth IRA, you're probably going to need to get a whole bunch of information together just to do like a direct rollover. So your existing plan, they're going to want to know where the money is going, like who's the custodian, which is basically like the bank that holds the money. What's the account number possibly? They might want to know that. Where are they mailing the check to? If they're not mailing it to you, they want like an address that they can actually send that check to. So make sure that you have all of that information available when you get ready to call them.
Yeah, and if you're working with a financial advisor, get your advisor involved. That's what you're paying them for. They can hop on the phone with you to call the employer, make sure, they can translate the lingo to plain English and, make sure things are executed the way they're supposed to be to get the money to the right place. So.
Yep, absolutely. I don't have a whole lot to add, Corey. I think whatever you do, just, be aware of all the tax consequences. That's a big one. Anytime you're taking a distribution from like a 403B or 401k, they usually are required to give you some like tax disclosures. So, if you're at all unclear, maybe you read that over before you proceed. But generally speaking, like we talked about it.
Yeah, talk to your tax person to get, more concrete estimates for what the tax implications will be for you specifically. As it obviously can vary by individual circumstances. So make sure you're
Awesome.
aware so there's no big surprises come April.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for listening, everyone. Always let us know if you have questions.
See you next time.
Oh my God. You hear my doorbell ringing? It's children.
I did not.
Children.
You're trying to sell
And
your
now
Girl
they're
Scout
knocking.
cookies, or?
They're so obnoxious. I can't even handle it sometimes. They're so obnoxious.
Are they wanting to play with Colette, or are they actually selling Girl Scout cookies?
No, they want to play. It's early release day, but we make Colette go to after school. So.
Got it.
she was like very upset about that this morning. Yeah.
Mom and dad have to
She
work.
was,
You get to stay at school.
yeah, she was trying to bargain hardcore with me though. She was like, if you do, I promise. She was hardcore.
Camden every morning says he's not going to school. He doesn't want to go. So.
How does that go? Once in a while, I'm like, what if she just like puts her foot down and just like, what would I do?
I don't know. I mean, he likes school when he's there. It's just the getting him there.
Getting him there.
No. Then he goes half days Monday, Wednesday, and long days Tuesday, Thursday. He's like, I hate long days. I'm not going on long days. Like, you're going, kid.
Yeah, you don't have a choice. Sorry.
Yeah. Then he has homework too, which is the easiest. Like he just has to write letters on a sheet of paper, basically. It takes 5 minutes if he actually wants to do it. But it's the most challenging thing to get him to actually do his homework. It's like, dude, you just have to write the letter O like 20 times on this sheet of paper and then color the pictures that start with the letter O. You'd be done in 5 minutes. Your teachers say you do it just fine at school. And he'll literally rip the paper in half, crumple it up, scribble on it. It's like, God, Camden, you're killing me, man.
Is it worth it to fight with him about it? I think at that point I'd be like, how old are you? You don't need to do homework. This is bullshit. That's what I was. I mean, I'm right there with you, Camden.
Yeah.
He's not in kindergarten, right? He's in preschool.
No. But I mean, it's yeah, I could argue yeah, it's kind of stupid. Why are you sending him homework? He's in preschool. But at the same time, it's you gotta learn to listen to authority and do what your teachers ask you to do. Otherwise, you're gonna grow up to be an asshole. But
I know it's hard though. I mean, I do feel like I was just talking to Colette, kindergarten teacher. She's like, kindergarten is the new first grade. The stuff that they do in kindergarten now is not what we did in kindergarten.
We had show and tell and recess. That's all I remember.
Yeah, and you had a buddy and you sat in a circle while the teacher read you a book and you took a little nap and that was kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And now it's it's intense. It really is. And I don't know if it's better. Right? It's so crazy. But it's kind of amazing. So, I mean, and Colette has homework, and I'm very much of the opinion that, if it gets done, awesome. If it doesn't, I am, no. I'm just not going to push her. If we're having a hard night or whatever, I'm cool, it didn't get done tonight. And because we have one sheet that we do, it's front and back, and you're supposed to do it every night and just initial on the top. And sometimes we hand it in, and we have 2 initials or 3 initials. It's fine. But yeah, she does probably 3 weeks ago. I don't know what happened, but this switch just flicked, and all of a sudden she's like, I could read. And she's just reading stuff. I was like, what just happened? It was so crazy. Yeah, because it was she had been doing okay before, but she was they send these little book poems that they're supposed to read every night, and it teaches them how to read with context. You might not know this word, but there's a picture of a bird underneath it, so that word is bird, and then they do their sight words, and so they learn a whole bunch of words just by sight. And so I think putting those 2 things together gets them to the point where they're reading much faster than actually knowing the words. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the words you can't stand out because there's so many complicated rules in English. It's ridiculous. But yeah, she can legitimately read
awesome.
Simple books at this point. I know. I was what is happening? And it literally just seemed like it happened overnight.
Nice.
But, yeah. And now I'm well, we're not going to read these little books that your teacher's sending home because you want to read these other books that are better and longer. And I emailed her about it. I was we have a month time. Let's take Chromebooks. And she was dude, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because she noticed it too. She was all of a sudden she could do all of her sight words. And yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it just happened.
Yeah, it's weird.
Anyway,
the teachers, they've got to keep the lowest common denominator basically. So half the kids can't read, so we got to start with the 3-letter words, but then you got the kids who are smart enough to get through the whole, and all right, challenge them, push them. Let's give them some more.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're gonna get bored sitting there while they're learning cat and dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Colette didn't know how to read at all when she started kindergarten. Like we hadn't, I was like, no, we're not doing that.
I don't think Camden, he can't read, but he knows all the letters, of course. And like he can write them, and there might be a few words that he can recognize at this point, just because he has one of those leapfrog. Have you seen any of those like leapfrog toys? They look like little Game Boys or laptops and stuff. So he has the Rocket Twist, which has, they're all just educational games, and some of them are short, like 3, 4, 5 letter words. So I'm sure he can recognize some of them. But
if you are in a moment where you just like want to hand him a device, there's a really cool app called Duo ABC. It's like Duolingo, but it's a reading app
on your phone app.
Yeah.
Duo ABC.
Or like probably on an iPad. Duo ABC. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's totally the same as Duolingo, but it's for reading. It's super fun, like because they have stories and they also have lessons. So you can go back and forth between the stories and the lessons. And it's free.
Myself. Oh, nice.
Duo
ABC app.
Yeah. All right. I better go take this dog for a walk. She's gonna go crazy.
Enjoy. I gotta crank out emails and life.
Deal. Spring. Yeah, life, right? I know. I'm looking. I'm like, okay. My bar is set really low right now, Corey. As far as like, yeah. I have some goals for myself today, but honestly, like I've been trying to do my recaps as I go more, especially with the important ones. Just like send it right after the meeting.
Yeah.
As man, I can just, yeah.
Were you
I still have quite a
training yesterday morning that I did?
No, I don't even remember what I was doing yesterday morning.
Yeah. That's what I talked about. I'm like, usually my review meetings take like 40, 45 minutes. And then I got 15, 20 minutes to crank out the recap email, update Redtail trackers, etc. And then boom, I'm done. Don't have to think about it until the next meeting is scheduled. So
yeah. And a lot of so I had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 meetings so far this week, and there's only 5 of the recaps that haven't been written. That's not so bad. But yeah.
I'm done with meetings for the week and get to go have my vasectomy tomorrow. So exciting times. Has Nick been snipped, or are you guys still?
No, we never
sure
really
if we're gonna
thought
have
about
another
it.
one.
No, we're done. I mean, so I think the reason we didn't think about it is because we were so wishy-washy for so long. And like we weren't really wishy-washy. We were like 80-20, pretty sure that we weren't going to have another kid. But still, there was like that 20% chance. I think that ship has sailed at this point. But it happened so gradually that like we just never really had that conversation.
What are you guys doing for
the other day? I was like, what? Oh, I have an IUD.
Okay. Yeah, Lindsay's not on it.
And that's the other reason. It's like, you don't really even have to think about it.
Not a risk.
Yeah. But, I mean, a very minimal risk.
Our risk is low. It's like the twice a year that we don't have kids in our bed. It's like abstinence is a great preventer.
The best. Oh, my gosh. But yeah, I did actually, like when you said you were going to get a vasectomy, I totally was like, hey, Nick, you were going to vasectomy? And he was like, do you want me to? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I hadn't really thought about it. And it was kind of funny. He just had his 1-year anniversary with the whole kidney thing.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. How's he doing with it?
Yeah, he's fine. His brother's so much better.
That's good.
Yeah.
I totally forgot that happened.
Yeah, I think the only thing is like he can't take like aspirin and Advil. I'm like, that's like the biggest change in his life.
Yeah.
And any of those NSAID or whatever those are, he's not supposed to take those. But that's literally it. kind of crazy. So crazy what they can do nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I've talked
All
your
right.
ear off.
I'll let you go.
Yeah. Have a good one. Good luck.
Thank you. See ya.
Can you like drink your alcohol while you're recovering?
I think so. Like it sounds like I'll just be in and out within an hour. It's not
Okay.
even.
So no like heavy meds or anything.
No, they said it's just local anesthesia. If you want, we can give you a Valium. You know, you won't. I think just to help because people get weird when stuff's happening down there. So
Mhm.
help with the anxiety. So like, hey, maybe I'll take a Valium. I've never had Valium before. Um, but yeah, they just said like lay low for a couple days and then you can get back to work on Monday and do your usual
Yeah.
stuff. There's no heavy lifting or exercise for a week, and then after a week you can basically go back to your normal life. So
Yeah.
trying to explain to Lindsay like I need to not do stuff this weekend. I need to just sit down and watch golf all weekend. Players Championships on. She's like, that's bullshit. My dad said he played golf the day after his vasectomy. I'm like, you're not helping me, Larry. I'm just telling you what the instructions said, and the doctor told me lay on the couch, ice.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Well, good luck.
All right. See you later.
Bye.